Just how much did we, the public, unwittingly spend on this year's presidential election campaign? Find out after the break. Welcome back. The presidential election campaign of 2010 was fraught with allegations of violence against opponents as well as the abuse of state property and assets. Apart from interfering with the holding of free and fair elections, such malpractices also result in a huge loss of public resources, which in the end is borne by the people. In our next report, we take a look at the efforts of an anti-corruption organization working to record and investigate the abuse of public property by political parties, candidates, and other officials or public institutions during the recent presidential elections.
It was in December 2009, after nominations were handed over, that Transparency International Sri Lanka launched their program, The Protection of Public Resources. Over the next 4 weeks, they had received 260 complaints, with the numbers escalating as election day drew closer.
බුද්ධේපල අයථා පරිහරණයෙන් විනාශ වෙන හැම රුපියලක්ම අත්වශයෙන්ම මහජනතාවගේ බදු මුදල්. අපි මුලින්ම උත්සාහ කරා මහජනතාවට මේක ගැන දැනුම් දෙන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට සහාය දෙන්න කියලා මේ වැඩසටහන මහජනතාව වෙනුවෙන් තමයි අපි මේ වැඩසටහන පවත්වාගෙන යන්නේ. ඒ අනුව අපි පුවත්පත් දැන්වීම් වලට ගියා, පුවත්පත් රූපවාහිනී ගුවන්විදුලි දැන්වීම් හරහා මහජනතාව ආමන්ත්‍රණය කරා වැඩසටහන පිළිබඳව උන්ට දැනුම්වත් භාවයක් ලබා දෙන්න. ඉන්පස්සේ අපිට අත්‍තරම සෑහෙන ප්‍රමාණයක පැමිණිලි ලැබිලා තියෙනවා, තවදුරටත් ලැබෙමින් තියෙනවා. අපිට තොරතුරු ලැබෙන එක ප්‍රධාන මාර්ගයක් තමයි දුරකථනය.
Transparency International Sri Lanka called on the public to report instances of the misuse of public resources. These were recorded and investigated by a team of researchers, lawyers, journalists and retired public officials. Their findings confirmed the significant abuse of state resources.
A political party is supposed to fund its own campaign through its own money. Right? And these are the taxpayers, the money of the taxpayers, which are coming from people who belong to different political opinions, different parties and so on. So the fundamental question is how a particular party, which have the control of public property at one given time, can benefit out of it for their election campaign. So if you define corruption, corruption is basically the use of authority for personal gain. Normally the trend in Sri Lanka is people who have the control over public resources to use it for their campaign during the time of the election. So it's clearly a form of corruption.
Among the verified cases of state abuse recorded by TISL are complaints about the use of government vehicles and transport, and government buildings and other services. The misuse of the state media was also reported by many individuals. In fact, members of the state media themselves, supported by media organizations, took to the streets in protest in a rare show of courage and conviction. The demonstration outside the Sri Lanka Rupavahini Corporation in Colombo highlighted the abuse of state TV airtime for propaganda purposes, with the incumbent being favoured over other candidates. The Commission of Elections has sent several reminders about the rules requiring balanced coverage and tried to introduce a competent authority to monitor the TV stations, but he has not been heeded. And a Supreme Court ruling has also been ignored.
අපි රාජ්‍ය මාධ්‍ය අතන වල වැඩ කරන මාධ්‍යවේදීන් හැටියට මේ රාජ්‍ය පරිපාලනයන්ට අපි අවස්ථා ගණනාවකදී දැනුම් දුන්නා මේ වැඩේ ඊටාම වැරදි වැඩක් මාධ්‍ය නිදහසට කරන ඊටාම නරක ආදර්ශයක් කරුණා කරලා මේ රටේ මාධ්‍යයට සම්බර්ධතාවයක් ඇතුව යම් අවම සදාචාරයක් ඇතුව මේ මාධ්‍ය හසුරවන්න කියලා. නමුත් මාධ්‍ය පාලකයන් සහ දේශපාලනකින් බලපෑම් මත මේක තුට්ටුවට ගණන් ගත්තේ නැහැ. මේ කාලේ මැතිවරණ කොමසාරිස්වරයාගේ උපමානයන් ගරුකටයුතු වෙනවා. ඒවා තුට්ටුවකට සලකන්නේ. අන්තිමේදී මේ රටේ උපරිම තැන ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණය දුන්න නියෝගයවත් කිසිම සැලකිල්ලක් නොදක්වා ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨ අධිකරණයට පයින් ගගා ගහසමින් මේ රාජ්‍ය මාධ්‍ය හැසිරෙනවා.
අපි ඉල්ලන්නේ එකම එක දෙයයි මේ මැතිවරණ සමයේ ජනතාවට නිදහසේ සත්‍ය දැන ගැනීම සඳහා තොරතුරු දැන ගැනීම සඳහා අදහස් පළ කිරීම සඳහා අවශ්‍ය නිදහස මේ ආයතන තුලින් ස්ථාපිත කර දෙන්නේ.
While the abuse of state property has always been a feature of Sri Lanka's election campaigns, the TISL initiative indicates that the situation was far worse during this election when compared to those that have taken place since 2004, when such a monitoring exercise first took place. Unfortunately, public awareness of election laws and practices appears to be limited.
Normally, the basic understanding is like the government can use their property for their election campaign. But unfortunately, we have failed to think as a society what they are using is public property, and that is consisted or built up using the taxpayers' money. So therefore, it belongs to the public. And these political party campaigns are to be or supposed to be run by the political parties or the candidates or through voluntary contribution. So we intended to educate public at the same time to discourage the candidates and political parties from engaging in these kind of practices, because these kind of practices clearly violate the regulations and directions given by the Election Commission as well as the law of the country.
TISL is committed to promoting good governance and preventing corruption. But for such concepts to translate into action in public life, it is the citizens of the country that must take a stand.
At the long run, we have to create a public debate on the issue, and I think the evidence that we gather would amount to a public debate eventually, where people would agree or where voters of this country or general public of this country will challenge such uses by the politicians during the time of the election. I think this is our ultimate objective of the program.